to share my experience of um, being diagnosed as COVID positive and how I dealt with it. So my name is Mynoo Maryel, and thank you, Leslie, for asking me to share this. So I did not have any symptoms at all. There was nothing that would have triggered any concern whatsoever. However, I was planning to travel internally within India. So all throughout this time, I had based myself here in India, and I was planning to travel to Delhi. And since I was going to stay with a friend whose brother was slightly vulnerable in terms of having a lung condition, I decided that it would make sense for me to get myself tested before I leave. When I got myself tested, I came out as COVID positive. So I wasn't going to go anywhere. I chose to stay at home and isolate myself at home, um, not expecting anything to go wrong whatsoever. Now, I've been in Mumbai throughout this time. I arrived here on the 12th of March, and normally I would travel each month. And, from the 13th of March onwards, they closed the international flights, and we got into a complete lockdown almost very soon after, and have been in lockdowns that kept getting extended all the way through until now. And there are some internal flights that are available. However, we are not allowed to travel out as such. I live here in an apartment block, and my apartment, by God's grace, looks over a preserved forest land in one of the busiest cities in the world. So throughout this time, these last 6.5, 7 months, I've had the opportunity to spend a beautiful time, you know, doing everything that I do, being one with this beautiful forest land, experiencing the magic of nature reclaiming itself, seeing the atmosphere turn from a smoky gray to crystal clear with trees capped with bright orange blossoms just before the monsoons. Seeing the monsoon rains arrive, the skies clear up and turn completely blue with fluffy Simpson clouds, and a whole variety of new birds show up and fly around in wonderful formations at sunrise and sunsets. So it's been quite amazing. Now, I had created a lifestyle for myself. I chose to utilize this time of lockdown to reclaim full spectrum well-being, where I was firing and thriving on all cylinders: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, social, and environmental. So when I got diagnosed as COVID positive, it felt so odd that I did, but it did stop me in my tracks. It did get me to just take a big exhale and a deep inhale and pause momentarily. I started recognizing the power of this virus, and I will do a separate recording about the spiritual learnings of this journey of mine. What I want to share are some very specific physiological experiences and my experience of being cared for, where I was all by myself in my home. Within hours of me receiving a positive diagnosis, I was contacted by the municipal corporation here, and they explained what the protocol would be so that I could feel I'm cared for and that someone was going to visit me, to see that my home was well prepared, and I could in fact isolate myself at home, and if I needed anything urgently, that can be arranged, and also to sanitize the house fully in every nook and corner, so that I remained safe. They also gave me the, tracking my vitals protocol, which was, and that they would call me 3 times a day. So I never felt lonely. And if I was ever worried about anything, I could share it with them and they would find an alternative for me to being by myself. They did encourage me to consider going to one of the premium COVID care facilities, which were actually five-star hotels. Proportion part of those five-star hotels that had been converted into COVID care facilities, and I opted to stay at home. They came to visit me, as they said. They sanitized the whole floor. They also visited the neighbors, and 2 floors above me and 2 floors below me, measuring all of their vital signs to ensure that people were well. And my oxygen levels remained throughout this COVID experience. My oxygen levels remained from 98 to 100. Every time I did measure it 3 times a day. They would call me 3 times a day. And it's interesting, at least one of those calls was a longer call that asked me all sorts of questions about my mental well-being and my emotional state, as well as the physical comfort that I was experiencing or not experiencing, and if I wanted any additional support. The building itself, first they quarantined 3 floors. One was my floor and a couple of others. And then they quarantined some more areas of the building, which was amazing. The whole security team in the building stepped forward, and I had pretty much everything that I needed delivered to me. At my door, I also decided to buy one of those robot vacuum cleaners so that the house could be, kept clean. I must say that the first 7 days, I felt like nothing had changed. I felt the same level of energy, the same vitality. I was doing a number of online programs. I was in the middle of one of our premium programs called the Journey into Miracles, which is a very intense program, and it was an immersion week. And there were people from around the world that were part of that journey. I felt totally energized and did that journey for 5 days. I also do an online program three times a week called Beyond Meditation. I kept doing that as well. It felt good. I also have once a week where I do a 1 hour transmission focused on a very specific series, and I was in the middle of a 12 steps to exquisite enchanting relationships. And I did that too. I did not declare publicly that I was diagnosed as COVID positive until about 10 days into my whole experience. I chose to reorganize the rest of my day so that I could allow my body to recuperate. I was already on a regime of eating 1 meal a day, doing the intermittent fasting that way. So I continued doing that. I had doctor's appointments with 3 very specific specialists, just online consultation. And all 3 of them suggested that I should go to a hospital and get my chest scan, do a CT scan of the chest. And I chose not to do that. I did not want to go near a hospital. So I did not actually have a doctor caring for me as such during this time. I felt very cared for by the municipal corporation through their phone calls. And of course, my sister and my business partner, who lived in different towns and different countries, also connected with me 3 times a day to track my vital signs in terms of temperature, oxygen, and blood pressure. I had also, when I did the COVID test, I had also done a full body profile. So I'd received the results of the full body profile, and all of that was like all good news. It was great. So whatever regime I was following before I got diagnosed as COVID positive, I continued following that, and it was a vegan regime with a number of elixirs that I would drink before I began my meal, followed by a number of raw salads, followed by the main course, and all of that would happen within 2.5 hours, which was the time I would have my meal. So after I got diagnosed COVID positive, I was fortunate that I did not lose my sense of taste or sense of smell, and remained quite alert. Uh, did not experience any fever, did not experience any aches and pains as such. And I consciously chose not to take any medication um, whatsoever for the COVID um, treatments. Because in India, I mean, there were doctors that I spoke to, they did prescribe, and I did actually order the medicines. I did not take them at all. I increased a couple of supplements that I was taking. So here were the supplements that I took. And here are the natural elixirs, I call them, that also supported my immune system. So this is on the physical side. I'm going to talk about those in a minute. I very consciously also tracked my mental signs as well as emotional state and my connection to spirit. I proactively kept myself socially engaged and continued to enrich my environment using a number of vibration uplifting energetic practices. So let's look at the physical side. On the physical side, I would begin my day by having the following elixirs. I would soak a teaspoon of cumin, a teaspoon of cumin seed, a teaspoon of fenugreek seed, a teaspoon of carom seeds, or a teaspoon of fennel seeds. All four of these in one large glass, like a beer, a pint glass of water. I would soak them the night before. So then I would begin my morning by having this elixir drink. I would also soak a small, like a 2-inch stick of cinnamon in water with 2 cloves also soaked in the same water. So the next day I would have the elixir with all of the seeds soaked I would not eat the seeds. I would just drink the water. I also drank the extract of cinnamon and clove, just the water part. The cinnamon and clove could be reused for 3 consecutive days. And then I would just add it um, in my hot drink that I would also have. Now, those were the 2 things that I used. What I also did was I have a fabulous wheatgrass juice powder, and I would have a spoonful of that in half a glass of water, and that was great. I also soaked a spoonful of chia seed and a spoon of flax seed in water. And the next day, I would make a smoothie. And my smoothie had the soaked chia seed, the soaked flax seed. They had a protein and a scoopful of protein. It was plant-based protein. I used pea protein, so I would have that. I would also add to it a teaspoon, a heaped teaspoon of moringa. And I would, if I had a fruit like papaya or berries, blueberries, I would add that. The base that I use for the smoothie was either almond milk or coconut milk, or we have something called sweet lime here, and coconut water. I was able to get coconut water delivered to me at home every single day, like fresh green coconut. So any of those is formed the base of my smoothie. So I would make that smoothie. Just to give it even more flavor, I would sometimes add a cardamom pod to it. So that was one piece that I did. In preparation for my morning, I would make a liter of coconut water mixed with aloe vera gel, as well as ginger, turmeric, and some black pepper. And I would grind it all up and strain it and then fill a liter of bottle of that drink for me, and I would be sipping that. Oh, I added lemon juice as well, so lemon juice too. So that was a very beautiful, nutritious, yummy, and immune boosting drink. So those were all the various drinks that I did. Um, in terms of um, in terms of what I ate, 70% of my plate was actually raw food. So I experimented with different types of salads. I learned to sprout all the lentils that I ate or beans. I only ate if they were sprouted, and I sprouted them myself. I have a particular series of paintings that I have done which reprogram water, and one of them is Miracle Vitality, and there's one which actually deprograms water, takes away from the water all of the programming it's subject to, and returns it to become the seed of life. So all my soaking water was this, I call it the miracle water, and then I continue to I continue to sprout these mixed sprouts. And so one of the salads would be a slightly warm salad where I would have blanched the sprouts a little bit and added finely chopped tomatoes, cucumber, some, and lots of greens like fresh mint, fresh coriander, um, fresh dill if I got that, fresh chives if I got that. And if I had basil, I would have added that. I didn't really get basil here. I always love to squirt a little bit of lemon juice to it, and a tablespoon of pomegranate seeds would go into my sprout salad. So that was something that I ate, pretty much every day. In addition to that, I would have a couple of other salads. There was one which was to boost my digestive enzymes. So it's a pomelo season, and it has also been the raw papaya season, and we also had the raw mango season during the lockdown. So I would make like a Thai salad with it was either a Thai raw mango salad, or a Thai papaya salad, or a pomelo salad, which had a combination of nuts, toasted sesame seeds. Um, well, it had toasted peanuts, toasted sesame seed, toasted sunflower seeds, toasted grated coconut, um, tamarind, often with raw garlic. So it was a great way of having a good amount of raw garlic with a little bit of um, super spicy chili, because chili is very rich in vitamin C. And the super spicy one, you don't have to kill yourself with it. But by mixing it with all of this, what it does is you get that spice of the chili, and it's in the ingredients, and it not only supplies the vitamin C, it also starts to release plaque from your tubes, the inner lining of various tubes that make up our physiological system. So that would always be one of the salads. And then I had another one which was just a regular mixed salad equivalent. Um, I reduced, I completely stopped having any form of sugar whatsoever. So there was no fructose, there was no cane sugar, there was no coconut sugar, there was none of that, and absolutely no white sugar at all, none of that. I did have some xylitol with me, that from time to time I might use that in the dressing. The 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 tartness of my dressing, if I used vinegar, it was always ACV, not any other form of vinegar. And where possible, I would use a combination of lemon juice and orange juice for the citrus aspect of the salads. I also created a probiotic drink for myself, which I would have at least 3 times a week, um, and use the beetroot in the probiotic concoction that I had created as um, as as uh, as ingredients for some of the salads. So the probiotic drink basically had chopped up beetroot raw, chopped up beetroot, like one beetroot, you chop up into small little cubes. You take the water from yogurt, not the yogurt itself, just the water, and cover the beetroot with that water, add a bit of salt, and fill up a liter with that water. And then you allow it to ferment in sunlight for 3 to 6 days. Where I was able to actually get the right fermentation within 3 days. And after that, for a couple more days, I would keep it out and just have a shot of that. Um, every day. I would often have a shot of that just before I ate my main meal, the cooked meal. My cooked meal usually just had, um, you know, one like a lentil type stew or lentil itself, and a cooked vegetable, and quinoa. And if I made bread, it was I did not have any wheat or gluten. My breads were homemade, and they were made with a combination of 4 different types of millets that came together to make up my bread. And I would just have one or one and a half of those. Um, Very, very rarely and occasionally I had rice, but mostly I did not have rice. In terms of my salad dressings, um, I I happen to have brought miso, a really good quality miso from a Japanese market in Los Angeles on my way to India. So, I would use the miso. I would use a combination of tamarind. I had kombu, which I would use in if I cooked rice or any stew. I would have put the kombu in it, or quinoa. Always had a piece of kombu in it, and then I would chop up the kombu and mix it up in the stew. That's something I did. Sometimes the tartness of my dressings, for that I would use omiboshi plum. Um, so really, as much as I could, using natural ingredients and all freshly made and freshly cooked. Um, a dessert. I made it a point to have a yummy dessert at least 3 times a week, and did lots of experimentation with desserts that where the base was coconut milk. It was either made by me or it was bought in a can, one of the good varieties of those. Um, I also learned to make something quite special with cranberries. Uh, because after 7 days, I started feeling that my kidneys were starting to get loaded, and I felt that I needed to give my bladder and urethra some support. So I happened to have frozen cranberries, and I experimented and made up this amazing concoction of a savory tart drink with coconut milk and cranberries, with a little bit of black pepper and black rock salt, and some freshly chopped coriander and ground up, mint, and a bit of very finely grated ginger juice in it. And it was just totally yummy. So that was tart, but there was also a dessert version of it that I created. And when I made the dessert version of it, I would add some freshly chopped dates. I also had bought apricots, dried apricots, and soaked them. And I would soak the apricots in water, filtered water, and almonds. So sometimes in my dessert, I would have the cranberries, coconut cream, add these soaked apricots like fruit. They would have plumped up like a real apricot, and blanched, remove the skin of the almonds and chop them up fine and put them in. I would add cacao nibs to it. And if I was having dessert, I would always add moringa. I know it adds a little bit of bitterness to it, but it felt so good. So I would always add a bit of moringa. So I knew that when I was having dessert, I was also having the super food added to it. I also had bee pollen, so I would sprinkle bee pollen on the top for the dessert. But the dessert was, very often it really was only 3 times a week. So that was all the food stuff. Um, I was walking about an hour or so every day before I got diagnosed as COVID positive. And I continued doing that, except on day 7, it was like suddenly, like the wind just stopped. From my wind just got taken out from my sails, and I was just didn't feel like moving at all. So I realized that okay, there's something for me to be mindful of, and I didn't. I stopped walking as much as I was walking. I um, I started working on doing my lymphatic pump exercises, as well as standing on the bed of nails to keep the base of my feet stimulated, and through that to be stimulating my organs. Um, from day 7 to day 11, I felt as if the virus load was increasing in me. There were no symptoms still. My oxygen levels were still fine, but just internally, I felt that the virus load was increasing. And it was on one of those days in the evening, I was just sitting down and starting to look at what I watch on Netflix, and I felt a choking feeling in my throat, as if there was something that was choking me from within. I decided to get up from my lounge chair, and it was only a few seconds, but it actually felt really hard to get up. I did manage to get up, went and found my oximeter, measured my oxygen level. It was 97. And so far it had all been 98, 90, well, really 99 and 100. And here it was 97. So it was still well above normal range. And I just sat down again and breathed into my throat, filling it with love, kindness, and compassion, and breathing out gratitude and peace. I also felt a little bit of burning in my throat, but it only took a few minutes and it disappeared. But I knew there was something that was going on. And the same thing happened the next day, around the same sort of time. And this continued for 3 days. The next day, what occurred was I felt a choking feeling. Now, at this point, I was walking around wherever I went, I was walking around with the oximeter. And I did not have any fever. All of that was good. And when I felt the choking feeling, I just said, oh gosh. And I realized that I couldn't hear my voice. So I knew that it was more serious than it had been the day before. And I did the same thing. Fortunately, I did not experience any fear whatsoever. Though I felt that if somebody has COVID, has been diagnosed, and they're by themselves, it's probably not such a good idea, because not everyone has the kind of regime that I have, and not everybody has um, the access to being able to, be calm during this time. So, I felt that made sense for people to be observed. I did not feel that I wanted to necessarily change my state at all. And it only took a few minutes of breathing into it. I got myself to connect to the virus and, establish why it was there in me, and what was its reason for occupying my being, and when was it going to go. Um, and what I got was, there was a reason why it was there, because I needed to connect to the vibration of the antibodies. What I also got from the virus was that it was there, not as it was demonstrating to me and to everybody that was watching me and listening to me, um, you know, during the week, that you can have the virus, you can be in the middle of being infected with it, and you can still show up. You don't have to be fearful. You don't have to. What it was saying to me was, we are not aggressive. We have done the work that came here to do, which was to get humans to reconnect to the core values that they stand for. So, we are not aggressive anymore. We were. We are not aggressive anymore. Don't be aggressive about us by putting, a lot of your own fears onto us. We are ready to leave. And so it was like me having this, going through it, showing up, leading people around the world through their own journey into miracles, through beyond meditation, through these powerful, very practical programs in building exquisite, enchanting relationships whilst I was suffering from COVID, whilst the virus load was building up, was something that was also going to give comfort to others about being able to remain calm whilst if you are ever diagnosed with it. So that was, and vibrationally, it was important for me to link to the antibody vibration, so that that vibration can holographically be spread across the planet, the antibodies themselves, so that people stop, the virus infection start to become even less virulent, and ultimately stop, because there would be so many people that would have the antibodies in their field. So I got that, okay, that is what was going on. I wasn't sure how many more days I was going to have this experience. It lasted 4 days. 3 days was very intense. The fourth day it was there, and maybe I just got used to it by that time. And these were the days when I did not feel I wanted to do anything other than fulfill the commitment that I had made to show up online on the times that I had committed to show up. I allowed myself to have my afternoon siestas, and completely stopped walking altogether. I spent a lot of time allowing myself to be in my own space, used the whole brain state methodology that I have to de-stress myself and to uplift my vibrational frequencies. So engaged in that 4 or 5 times a day. That was really powerful. Where I live, my bed is right next to literally floor to ceiling windows that overlook the forest. So it felt spending a lot of time on my bed, being in this amazing journey of uplifting my vibrations. I felt like I was flying and gliding across the globe. I also allowed myself to be taken energetically on a past life regression, which was in fact my past life in this lifetime, and just clean up anything that remains. So all of that occurred. I also had my 60th birthday during the course of this COVID infection and self-isolation, and it was completely phenomenal celebration of from all around the world, and I was able to just be there receiving the blessings and the sharings from around the world. Um, and that was amazing. The interesting thing that I would say is, as I would have these calls 3 times a day with the municipal corporation, sometimes they would apologize for, ringing me 3 times a day. And they kept saying, "Ma'am, we are not checking in on you. You're 60 now. We just have to be careful, and you're by yourself, and that's why we're calling you. So please don't mind this. We just want to be sure that you're safe." So that was great. I had my 60 therapy before my 60th birthday, so that was fabulous. After I completed my 14 days, did the test, it was negative, and there were 10 other cases in my building. So the entire building became a one of those isolation zones. So I had the bonus of another 15 days of complete isolated quarantine. And that was wonderful because it allowed my antibodies to build up very nicely. Did not experience any after effects that many people talk about. I do believe that many of those after effects are often the after effects of the medication that people take. I saw very clearly from my perspective that it was not about the medication. The virus was ready to go. If it does come, just do what you can to boost your immunity. And in fact, keep boosting your immunity all the way through. It introduced some good practices of hygiene and cleanliness and self-discovery. So that has been my journey of going through this whole COVID experience. I hope that's useful. And by the way, you asked about the blood group. I am B positive. So if that has any relevance, then okay, that's what it is. Yeah, I've returned to my hour-and-a-half walks. I've introduced weights into my walking regime. I haven't returned to some of the hardcore aerobics I was doing yet. And it's been about 5 weeks now since I was first diagnosed as COVID positive. And enjoying the freedom to be able to actually meet real people and go and into a shop and even go to a coffee shop. So that's my journey. I call it my crowning glory moment. I hope that's useful. Lots of love. And thank you, Leslie, for asking.